I'm getting ready to put the fretboard on. I've got it slotted, obviously, and tapered. It's 54 millimeters at the nut and 64 at the 12th fret. I've got the center line marked on the fretboard, and it's lined up with the center of the body. So what I'm going to do now is drill a couple of pilot holes in two of the fret slots that I can put some anchoring pins so it doesn't slide around while I make the final adjustments and get the fretboard glued on. So that'll keep the fretboard lined up with the center of the soundboard. Don't have to worry about it moving around as I make the final preparations. So obviously one thing I have to do is cut off the end of the fretboard. Typically on a classical guitar, the 19th fret is only partial, and part of it goes or gets cut away as the board overlaps the sound hole. I'll use a sharp pencil and trace along the edge of the sound hole, making the pencil mark on the ebony, and that will tell me where to cut, just like that. Alright, so that's lined up pretty nicely. So fretboard is all set to be glued, but before I do that, there's this channel that needs to be filled. I cut that way back when I started the neck, and the plan was to put this piece of carbon fiber bar to strengthen the neck a little bit. It's very stiff, certainly much stiffer than the equivalent amount of Spanish cedar. Probably not necessary. Classical guitars have been built for 100 years with no reinforcement at all in the neck, and they did just fine, although modern strings do exert a little more tension. But there's really no downside to doing this. It definitely gives the owner of the guitar a little bit of confidence that the neck's not going to go anywhere, and it gives me that confidence too. So I'm just going to cut this bar in half, since it's about equal, and epoxy it in place. And then as soon as the epoxy dries, I'll be ready to put the fretboard on. So the carbon bar is glued in and the epoxy's dry. So now it's time to put on the fretboard. Using my nails to do the alignment. And then just use this method that I find gives me the best distribution of clamping pressure. High-tech rubber band. That. And now for over the body, just Put a couple of sticks there to get more of the pressure at the edges. And that's it. Now before I put the frets in, I will sand the fretboard up to 320 grit. This fretboard has a 20-foot radius. Makes it a little more comfortable for the player, especially doing bar chords. So I'm using a block with a 20-foot radius on it. And this not only smooths out the wood, but if there are any small humps or valleys, it takes the high spots out. I've got the fretboard sanded, and the fret wire I bent to a radius that's tighter than the 20-foot radius of the fretboard. That'll hopefully help the frets seat better. And now before I start pounding in frets, I'm just going to take a 3-corner file and enlarge the entrance to the fret slot. It makes it a little easier to put the fret wire in, and definitely makes it easier to take the fret wire out should I ever need to without chipping the ebony. So just a few strokes with this file, and then I'll start putting in frets. So I've got this block of wood supporting the neck. I'll move it along as I move up the fretboard. And brass hammer and 2 feet of fret wire here. So I don't cut the fret wire before I install it. It seems to go faster this way. So after I tack it down, then I cut. Hammer it a few more times. Before I start filing the edges of the frets, I'm going to put a drop of thick super glue in here, and that does 2 things. One, it stabilizes the fret a little bit, although they're really quite solid in there anyway. The main reason I do this is to just fill in that little gap between the bottom of the fret and the bottom of the fret slot in the ebony. If I leave that open, when I put the finish on the guitar, there will be a hole, or it'll look like a hole under every fret, and I don't want that. Now once this glue dries, I'll start smoothing off the edges and check to make sure all the frets are level.